The sprawling Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida was bathed in golden lights, exuding the grandeur expected of a Trump family celebration. The air buzzed with excitement as the elite of Washington, celebrities, and close friends of the Trump family gathered for a momentous occasion, Barron Trump's 19th birthday. It was a night of splendor designed to be unforgettable. Tables adorned with lavish floral arrangements and golden tableware gleamed under the chandeliers. A stage was set at the far end of the grand ballroom where musicians played soft jazz, adding a touch of elegance to the evening. The ocean breeze, carrying the scent of salt and magnolias, swirled around the terrace where guests sipped on champagne, engaged in polite conversation, and waited for the night's highlight, the unveiling of the surprise gift. Among the many distinguished guests, one figure stood out: Pam Bondi, the United States Attorney General. A woman known for her sharp legal acumen, unwavering loyalty to the Trump family, and a warm heart, she carried a small, velvet box in her hand. Her eyes twinkled with excitement, for she knew the gift she was about to present would leave everyone speechless. Barron Trump, now standing tall and poised at 19, had inherited his father's presence and his mother's grace. Clad in a crisp navy blue suit, he greeted each guest with a firm handshake, showing maturity beyond his years. Unlike his past birthdays, where he had been more reserved, tonight he was at ease, laughing with his older siblings, Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric. Even Tiffany, his half-sister, had flown in from Washington, and Melania stood proudly beside her son, watching as he mingled effortlessly. As the evening unfolded, Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States, took to the stage. A hush fell over the crowd as he tapped the microphone, flashing his signature smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen, what a beautiful night, am I right?" His voice carried through the ballroom, drawing a round of applause. "We're here to celebrate a fantastic young man, my son, Barron. He's a great guy, folks. A brilliant mind, a strong heart, and very, very tall, just like me. Some people say taller. I don't know, but I've got great genes, the best genes." The crowd chuckled, indulging in Trump's characteristic humor. But tonight, he continued, isn't just about celebrating Barron, it's about the people who love him, who support him, and who believe in him. And one of those incredible people has a special gift, one that I think is going to be truly historic. At that moment, all eyes turned to Pam Bondi. She smiled warmly, stepping up to the stage with the velvet box still clutched in her hands. "Barron," she said, her voice filled with sincerity, "I've watched you grow from a quiet young boy into an intelligent, thoughtful, and kind-hearted young man. I wanted to give you something that represents not only your legacy but also your future." The room was silent, the anticipation thick in the air. Pam slowly opened the box, revealing a gleaming, vintage pocket watch. It wasn't just any pocket watch, it was an heirloom, intricately designed, with an engraving on the back that read, "To Barron William Trump, a leader in the making." Barron took the watch in his hands, his fingers tracing the delicate engravings. He swallowed hard, his blue eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. The entire room held its breath. The young man, who had grown up in the constant glare of the public eye, who had been scrutinized, praised, and criticized in equal measure, stood there, visibly moved. Melania, his ever-graceful mother, placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice laced with emotion. But what made this gift even more extraordinary was not just the watch itself, it was the story behind it. Pam Bondi took a deep breath, preparing to reveal the significance of the timepiece, a revelation that would send waves of heartfelt emotions through everyone in the room. A hush fell over the grand ballroom as Pam Bondi took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on Barron, who stood before her, clutching the exquisite pocket watch. The guests leaned in, sensing that the story behind the gift was about to unfold, and from the expression on Donald Trump's face, even he wasn't aware of what was coming. Pam turned to the audience and began, "This watch, Barron, belonged to a man who embodied resilience, determination, and the courage to fight for what he believed in." She paused, letting her words settle. "This watch belonged to your grandfather, Fred Trump." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Donald Trump's expression shifted from curiosity to deep surprise. Even Melania, usually composed, raised an eyebrow. Barron's fingers tightened around the watch as he looked up at Pam, his blue eyes filled with quiet amazement. "I spent months tracking it down," Pam continued. "It had been lost for decades, passed through collectors, auction houses, and private owners. But it originally belonged to Fred Trump, a man who built a legacy not just in real estate, but in the values of hard work, ambition, and perseverance. He carried this watch every single day while building his empire." A few murmurs spread through the guests. Many of them knew of Fred Trump, the patriarch of the Trump family, a real estate magnate who had built the foundation of the empire that Donald Trump later expanded. But what truly made the moment poignant was that this piece of history had found its way back into the hands of the youngest Trump heir. Donald Trump cleared his throat and stepped forward, taking a closer look at the watch. His eyes softened, a rare moment of unguarded emotion from a man known for his larger-than-life persona. "My father loved that watch," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I remember him checking the time on it every morning before heading out to work. He always said time was the most valuable thing a man could have. More than money, more than power. Time." The room fell completely silent as Barron turned the watch over, his fingers brushing over the engraving once more. His lips parted slightly, but he didn't yet speak. Instead, he looked at his father, at Pam, and finally at his mother, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. Pam smiled. "Your grandfather once wrote in a letter to your father, 'The future belongs to those who respect the past.' And Barron, that's why I wanted you to have this watch. Because you of all people are carrying forward a legacy. Not just of your name, but of what it means to build something great." Ivanka wiped at the corner of her eye, and even Don Jr., usually composed, seemed touched. Tiffany leaned in, whispering something to Eric, who simply nodded in agreement. The weight of history, a family, and of an unspoken expectation hung thick in the air. Finally, Barron spoke. His voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable depth to it. "Thank you, Ms. Bondi," he said, his tone carrying an unexpected maturity. "This means more to me than I can put into words." He looked at his father. "Grandfather's legacy is not just in buildings or businesses. It's in hard work, in ambition, and in family. I'll carry this watch not just as a memory of him, but as a reminder of the values he lived by." A round of applause erupted, some polite, but most genuine. There was something about this moment that transcended politics, fame, and wealth. It was about lineage, about history, and about a young man stepping into his own destiny. As the applause died down, Donald Trump placed a hand on Barron's shoulder. "You're gonna do great things, kid," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I always knew it. And now you've got time on your side." A few chuckles followed, but the warmth of the moment lingered. But the night wasn't over yet. Unbeknownst to Barron, there was another layer to this gift, one that would truly leave everyone in the room overwhelmed with emotion. Pam Bondi wasn't done. And as she prepared to reveal the final surprise, a few guests exchanged curious glances, sensing that something even bigger was about to unfold. As the applause settled and Barron admired the intricate details of the pocket watch, Pam Bondi took a step closer, her expression turning even more meaningful. She wasn't done yet. There was one final piece to this story, something that would make this moment truly unforgettable. She gestured toward the watch. "Barron, there's something else. Open the back of the watch." A ripple of curiosity spread through the room. Barron, his fingers steady, gently pressed on the hidden latch at the back of the watch. With a soft click, the panel popped open, revealing a folded, aged piece of paper neatly tucked inside. The room grew still. Melania's hand instinctively touched her lips, while Donald Trump, who had seen many surprises in his lifetime, now leaned in with intense focus. Ivanka, Don Jr., Eric, and Tiffany exchanged bewildered glances. No one had expected this. Barron carefully unfolded the delicate parchment. The ink, though faded, was still legible. It was a handwritten note, and at the bottom, in elegant cursive, was a signature. "Frederick Christ Trump." Donald Trump exhaled sharply. He recognized his father's handwriting instantly. Barron swallowed, his heart pounding as he read the words aloud. "To my grandson, whom I may never meet, but whose future I believe in. If you are reading this, it means the Trump name continues. Not just in wealth, but in strength, in ambition, and in responsibility. This world will challenge you, but if you carry the values of family, honor, and perseverance, you will leave behind a legacy greater than mine. Time is the greatest asset of all, use it wisely." A heavy silence followed. The weight of history, of a grandfather's foresight, settled over the crowd like a warm embrace. Donald Trump, for the first time in a long while, seemed at a loss for words. He blinked rapidly, then chuckled under his breath. "That sounds like my father, all right," he murmured, shaking his head in amazement. Barron, still holding the note, let out a slow breath. His voice, though quiet, carried conviction. "I never got to meet him," he said, looking at his father. "But I feel like, in a way, I just did." Melania, ever graceful, wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Pam Bondi stepped forward once more. "Barron, your grandfather wrote this note in 1998, long before you were born. He didn't know who would carry his legacy, but he knew someone would. And now it's you." A lump formed in Barron's throat, but he managed a small smile. He closed the watch, securing the letter carefully back inside. Donald Trump clapped a firm hand on his son's back. Well, kid, if my father were here, he'd probably tell you to quit standing around and start building something, he joked, earning a round of laughter from the guests. But beneath his humor, there was a rare and unmistakable pride in his eyes. The atmosphere in the ballroom had shifted. It was no longer just a birthday party. It was a moment of generational significance, one that had touched not just the Trump family but everyone in attendance. As the band began playing again and the servers resumed pouring champagne, conversation swirled around the incredible revelation. Guests murmured about how remarkable it was that Fred Trump had written a note to a grandson he had never met, yet whose future he had somehow foreseen. Barron, holding the watch tightly in his palm, felt something shift within him. He had always been in the public eye, but for the first time he felt the true weight of his family's name, not as a burden but as a responsibility. As the night carried on and the celebrations continued, one thought stayed with him. Time is the greatest asset of all, use it wisely. And for Barron Trump, his time was just beginning. As the night went on, the grand ballroom of Mar-a-Lago buzzed with conversations about the extraordinary revelation. The Trump family mingled with guests, but Barron, still holding the watch in his palm, remained quiet, lost in thought. Donald Trump, noticing his youngest son's contemplative expression, nudged him lightly. "Walk with me, kid," he said, stepping toward the open terrace that overlooked the ocean. Barron followed, the cool night air brushing against his face as they stepped outside. The waves crashed softly in the distance, the moon casting a silver glow over the estate. It was a rare moment of solitude between father and son. Donald leaned against the marble railing, gazing out at the water. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with a deep breath, he turned to Barron. "You know," he began, his voice unusually calm, "when I was your age, my father didn't give me something like this." He gestured toward the watch. "No handwritten letters, no grand speeches. Just lessons. Hard lessons." He believed in action more than words. Barron nodded, waiting. Donald smirked. "When I first started in business, he loaned me a few $1,000,000, not as a gift, but as a test. He wanted to see what I'd do with it. He used to say, 'Donald, if you can't turn $1 into 10, you don't deserve to hold it in the first place.'" Barron chuckled. "Sounds like something he'd say." Donald nodded, staring off into the horizon. He was tough, but he was right. He built something incredible and I expanded it. And now he turned to Barron, his expression serious. "Now it's your turn." Barron's brow furrowed slightly. "My turn." Donald smiled. "You're 19 now. A man. You've got your whole life ahead of you. And after tonight, you know exactly where you come from." He tapped the watch lightly. "But the real question is, where are you going?" Barron looked down at the watch in his hands. The weight of it felt different now. It wasn't just a relic from the past, it was a challenge for the future. "I don't know yet," he admitted honestly. Donald laughed, clapping him on the back. "Good. That means you're thinking. And trust me, Barron, when you do know, when you decide what your path is, you go at it with everything you've got. That's how you make a legacy." Barron met his father's gaze, a newfound determination settling in. He wasn't just the youngest Trump anymore. He was a young man standing at the crossroads of possibility. For years, he had watched his father command rooms, make deals, and leave his mark on the world. Now, for the first time, he felt the stirrings of his own ambitions. The world would be watching. But tonight, under the moonlit sky of Palm Beach, Barron Trump made a silent promise to himself. When the time came, he would be ready. As the two men stood in quiet understanding, the faint sounds of celebration drifted from inside. Barron glanced back at the grand ballroom, then at his father. He smiled. "Let's go back in." Donald grinned. "Atta boy." And together, they walked back inside, ready to embrace the future. As Barron and his father stepped back into the grand ballroom, the energy of the celebration wrapped around them like a warm embrace. Guests continued to chatter, glasses clinked in toasts, and laughter filled the air. But something had changed. For Barron, the evening no longer felt like just another extravagant party. It felt like the start of something far greater. Ivanka approached, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "So, little brother," she teased, though he was taller than her now, "how does it feel to carry the weight of history in your pocket?" Barron smirked, holding up the watch. "It's heavier than it looks." She chuckled. "Welcome to the club." Don Jr. and Eric joined them, each offering their own congratulations. "That's a hell of a gift," Eric remarked. "Pam really outdid herself." Don Jr. nodded. And Dad actually got emotional for a second. Almost thought we'd see him cry. Donald Trump, who had just joined the group, scoffed. "Fake news," he quipped, making them all laugh. Pam Bondi, standing nearby, observed the scene with a satisfied smile. She had given Barron something priceless. Not just a family heirloom, but a connection to his roots, a reminder of where he came from and where he could go. Melania, ever elegant, stepped beside her son. She didn't say much, but the pride in her eyes said everything. She placed a gentle hand on his arm and whispered, "Your grandfather would be very proud." Barron met her gaze, nodding. "I'll make sure of it." The celebration continued into the night, but for Barron, the real gift had already been given. The watch was more than a timepiece. It was a reminder, a challenge, and a symbol of his own journey. As the night wound down and guests began to depart, Barron stepped out onto the terrace one last time, the ocean breeze cool against his face. He pulled the watch from his pocket, flipping it open to read the engraving again. "To Baron William Trump, a leader in the making." He exhaled, a small smile forming. Maybe Pam had seen something in him that he hadn't fully recognized in himself yet. Maybe his grandfather had known, even before he was born, that he would one day be faced with great choices. One thing was certain, his time was coming, and when it did, he would be ready.